signals. Okay, my name's Amy, and we're just each going to introduce ourselves.
I'm Adriana.
My name is Asia.
My name is Winifred.
I'm Friday.
And our topic is Native American boarding schools and the long-term effects of Native American boarding schools.
So what we searched up for definitions was long-term, covered in a relatively long period of time. The effect, to act on, produce an effect or change in. A member of any original people to the Americas, including Indian and non-Indians. Boarding school, a school at which the pupil receives board and lodging during the school term.
And then I guess I'm going to go first. So the article I summarized is titled "The Harm Caused, a Narrative of Intergenerational Responsibility" by Megan Hoff, I think is how you say it. This was written in 2019. It relates to issues relevant to harms caused to students at Indian residential schools in Canada. Hoff discussed the definition of harm that courts must follow in different areas of the law in order to determine the type of repair or compensation available to a claimant for harms inflicted on the individual at institutions such as the Indian residential school. Types of harm included physical and sexual abuse, starvation, and neglect of education or development of necessary social skills. Most traumatic for the students was removing them from their families, preventing them from speaking their mother tongue, and denying them occasions to express their culture through language and associated rituals. It's a powerful attack on the personal and cultural identity of the students, and it can also be termed cultural genocide. Claims of cultural harm have been made in court cases, but to date have not been recognized by the courts. It says the government has stated that no basis exists at law to find reason for, the loss of language or culture arising from the operations at the Indian residential school. Some losses simply cannot be repaired. There is no way to resurrect a lost language, and so when they define harm, they're mostly looking at physical harm or sexual abuse, and a lot of the claimants in this, my writer is a lawyer for the Canadian government, and she was just kind of blown away by what is not, they're not able to compensate for it. But the traditional justice is making use of legal practices that are already there and kind of trying to tailor them or change them to these new types of harm. So.
My article was Indigenous Legal Principles, a Reparation Path of Canada's Cultural Genocide. Canada's justice system and lawyers do not get taught about Indigenous laws, so they are not prepared to understand or amend the relationship between the oppressed Indigenous people and their oppressors. So the best that they could compensate for the Indigenous people was to simply apologize and give sorry gifts for the colonial practices and prejudices, when in reality nothing can heal what has been lost, which the IRSSA, Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, was introduced for the damage done. The aftermath of the residential schools, people who were students filed lawsuits for what they had been through and were mostly unsuccessful. Though it has been apologized for before that it was hard. It was hard for Canada to even admit to the wrongdoings, as they did not want it to seem that it was that big of a deal, because the tons of victims it was later seen that they had finally gotten their long-awaited apologies from the government of Canada and the churches.
The title the title of my article was Children in English Instruction in the 19th Century on Indian Boarding Schools in Canada. And those schools attacked the indigenous languages and insisted on using only English. In 1895, the Deputy Superintendent General of Indian Affairs claimed that Native Americans were quote-unquote permanently disabled without the use of English language. As they grew older, they appeared to forget their native tongue due to the constant use of English. And as a result, the kids lost their fluency and weren't able to teach their own kids any other languages besides English. The long-term consequences of the English-only and native language ban included losing native speakers who could speak that language fluently. And as a result, many tribes today risk losing the last person who could speak that language, and many languages are dying or simply don't exist anymore. As a solution to this, many tribes offered the language course throughout elementary, middle, and high school, like where I went to high school in Newtown, North Dakota, located in the MHA Nation. They also created an app that offers the Hidatsa language in courses at the Nueta Hidatsa Sanish College.
Good.
Mine is just how trauma is still effective today. The title of this is Decolonizing Indian Residential Schools by Augustine. According to Park Augustine, in the late 1800s to 1996, there was a forced assimilation as well as forcing to get up Native American heritage. The government compelled Native American children to leave their homes and attend Indian residential schools that were supervised by Canada and run by churches. There was a lot of individual harm towards the kids in boarding schools that caused a lot of damage. Some survived but were left with many harmful marks. They were left with loss of language, culture, loss of family, community life, physical injuries, and even sexual injuries. The children that were in and out of that boarding school caused trauma to our ancestors after being physically abused if they didn't follow the church's guidelines. This trauma still carries on today because the language is less used today and our culture is dying slowly after they beat the children for going by their cultural heritage.
Good.
The article that I summarized today is Human Rights Abuses at Boarding School of Native American Children Must Be Examined. According to ABA House, Native kids at boarding schools were abused. Some were sexual abuse and physical as well. They were ripped away from their parents and taken into non-indigenous foster homes where they endured more abuse and even deaths. Some of the children discovered were as young as age 3 when they died. In the following months, a national search was conducted where they discovered hundreds of graves at other boarding school sites. In July, the remains of 9 children who died at a, I'm not going to say this word, I can say, Indian industrial school in Pennsylvania more than a century ago were returned to the Rose Bowl Indian Reservation in South Dakota, where they received proper burials. Many children died from illness, unsanitary conditions. Others died from attempting to escape the abuse during the Suffolk's leaders reported. The discovery spiked outrage and calls for an investigation into abuse at the residential schools of Native children. The investigation urges the government to cooperate with the Department of Interior's Indian Affairs Boarding School Initiative and hand down schools record to help uncover the truth of what is happening in boarding schools. The resolution passed 29310 U.S. Department of Interior Secretary Deb Harlan announced the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative in June. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you. Criteria now, just a couple questions. We got some context about the historical trauma. We heard from several Canadian articles, which is fine. It's Native Americans live in Canada and they're studying it, and they just uncovered this past summer more abuse and more investigations are happening. Was there something that had a solution from one of you? As we listened, I heard it. Which article kind of presented what could be done besides just apologizing?
The oldest sorry gifts,
Yes,
is that what you call it?
the middle, yeah.
I think in mine, I mean, they're starting to, like, this lawyer was, you know, whatever, they're starting to try to do, in criminal court, they can't really charge like the whole country, and so they're trying to do different, I don't know what it's really called, like alternative dispute resolutions, so mediation or whatever, and that would let them maybe even change the bigger laws someday, you know, because the things they talked about, where was that? Oh, some of the solutions I found in the article where they're trying to implement changes in school, like to teach about the history of the Indian residential schools to Native American students at certain age levels and inform them, and then also to have minority or Native American representation in government and political and judges and all of that kind of thing.
So you're getting hinted at that things are in process and working towards something. Also social media attention in the past 10 years. Any Q or A's from the audience? None? Then we'll have to do a
I'll
session.
do,
Okay.
do you guys have